It's interesting that I recently found, by looking at some letters from the early 60s, that a correspondence between Tim Leary and Albert Hofmann. And when Hofmann really expressed an interest in, Leary, I think, came up with the concept of consciousness expanding. And I use that concept now as a way to describe these substances. And it was interesting to me that I didn't know this at the time, but Hofmann wrote in a letter to Leary that he really appreciated that concept because he was already aware. He was a pharmaceutical a chemist working for a large pharmaceutical concern, Sandoz, when he stumbled across LSD and due to a mystical experience he'd had as a child, which the experience reminded him. It was completely outside of his prior experience. And so he understood right from the beginning, you can't, to only study them from a pharmacological, medical kind of therapeutic, psychotherapeutic point of view is okay, but it's not the only thing that's going on. Because these changes in consciousness that happen can call into question your entire worldview, your system of beliefs about what human beings are, what the world is about. And that's why it's been hard for people to agree on a descriptive term. And instead, this notion, Leary was really the first one to come up with the idea of a set and setting, which I think is key. Not only, and in my writings I use that notion, not only for a psychedelic state, but for any state of consciousness, including this one that we're in. We're actually in a state of consciousness. Did you know that? Because we're always in one state of consciousness and another. And the switch from one state is a kind of a threshold, and that defines an altered state. I mean, this altered state is a function of the set and setting that we all bring to it, obviously. How could it be otherwise, you see? It's the inner and the outer. What else is there? So, and you always really, but in these substances that magnify consciousness and awareness in an unspecific way, so the experience is always going to be a function of the set and setting. And so I now no longer want to use the term psychedelic, because psychedelic has become a pop culture term. And my daughter was 10 years old and she came home from school and said, whoa, 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 that's psychedelic, meaning sort of swirling paisley patterns, which is okay, that's become a pop culture term. So now I would like to go back to the terminology of consciousness expanding, which is, uses two ordinary words, and it's not a concept that most people think about very much. The typical reaction might be consciousness can expand, like who knew? And it actually turns out that consciousness expands and contracts all the time, according to our intentions and interests and situations that we're in. And then we go through life going through particular altered states. So every morning when you wake up, your consciousness expands. You're following some dream where you're walking down the street or maybe being chased by monsters or whatever it is. And then this own little drama, and then you wake up and you realize, oh, here I have this body and I'm in this bed and it's my spouse and here's the room in my house and the dog and the cat and the garden. It's like a series of consciousness expansions where it comes back to you that, your whole life comes back to you. So the therapeutic possibilities of consciousness expanding experiences cannot be overestimated.